Good day.
JAZZIE, thanks so much for giving up your night off on tour. And congratulations on the book. It's so beautifully done. The pictures are amazing. The stories are amazing. I loved in particular, the stories about you 14 or 13, travelling to gigs to catch the number 14 double-decker bus with your shopping trolley and your records in it. And there's also a beautiful story of you having sort of staging your own festival in your own street. And
I'll go on about that in a minute.
How does the excitement of that as a teen and organising your own big event and going to a DJ gig compare now to sort of turning up on stage to thousands of people on the other side of the world? It's kind of a very different mindset, I gather.
Well, technically, how that happened in the beginning, it was the Queen's Silver Jubilee, 1977. So it was about the community. And in those days, we had a class system, which we no longer have. So within our community, it's all working class people. A bit of an opportunity for a knees up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But more importantly for me and Daddy, it was our opportunity to, it was our first professional gig. We earned money from it. And in those days, we cut our teeth in the community. And I guess coming from a large family, as I do, my brothers and sisters around the local community centre, which again, it's not what you know, it's who, innit?
Yeah.
So that's how that all kicked off. So technically it was a street party organised by your leader, the leader of the Commonwealth. Yeah? She's brown bread now, but the legacy continues, as they say. So it's always interesting coming around to these, the subcontinents, as it were, and meeting your fellow members of the Commonwealth. Good day.
Talking about the Silver Jubilee, I mean, at that time, punk was like at its sort of pinnacle, and I think a lot of people would be surprised at how much of an impact that had on you as
a kid growing up. You see,
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it didn't. The impact of punk didn't really sort of, in my mind, manifest itself to a lot later on. So during the 70s, whatever we were going through was much more a community-led thing. I'm from a family that was that came to Britain, invited to Britain actually to rebuild it after the Second World War. The family's divided into two. So half of us, 6 of us, are born in Antigua in the Caribbean, and the rest of us are born in England. So I'm the second generation from the family that was born in England. So the difference in terms of what it was about for me, or for me and my sisters and brothers growing up at that time, my elders were always taught to fit into the British way of life and blah, blah, blah. And as a consequence of that, they became more English than us who were born in England. Yeah. And we weren't putting up with the same nonsense as they were. So it wasn't about us fitting in, because we were born and bred in England. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So there wasn't necessarily a divide as siblings, but on the odd occasion at church, it'll kick off. You know what I mean? Church played a major part in our life growing up as working class people from the Caribbean, because they've already been hypnotized, you know what I mean, from the old colonial days, and put the rod of fear in them over religion. And again, when you're growing up as a teenager, you're cutting your teeth. I'm living in Britain, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. That's how I came up. Going to school, they used to pat your head as a black kid for good luck. Yeah. And the best bit was, most of my white friends played Kiss Chase and stuff like that. All the brasses were interested in if I had a tail. Are you with that? I'm going to say it again. Growing up, when you were playing Kiss Chase and getting your first, whatever, intimate moment, what was happening in our community as a consequence of the parents coming up and ignorance, people thought black people, they feel your skin color would come off. Yes? This is Britain in the 70s, I'm talking. You're talking about patting your head for good luck. And I guess this would have been installed by their parents and their ignorance. So the kids would come along and think that black men had a tail because their parents were probably telling them we were descendants of monkeys. You understand? So that's what I came up in that sort of system. So I remember things like that, like, like going to like Church of England and those sort of like institutions, as it were, really boring, sitting down, doing all that bollocks. Punk had come along. I left school 79. So in the mid 70s, post all of that nonsense there, you would have had probably the war in Ireland, which was quite significant because a lot of our brothers and sisters would have had to have joined the army coming out of school if they didn't get apprenticeship. And if you go back in history, Britain had a long history of the colonies and the different people who fought the wars. Fuck me, they didn't know it was that close, you get me? So in terms of my generation and the stuff we put up with, would be post the Second World War and I guess the reign of Enoch Power and all them guys, do you know what I mean? Which I'm sure there's quite a few people in this room would have experienced a few of the things we were. But the difference was, I guess, because we were in the mother country and we were in London. So you're in the, shopping window of the rest of the world or the belly of the beast, so to speak. And these are the type of things that we grew up with and coped with. And it's only now that we live in a PC world where they're trying to change fucking the books about, it's got to finish like this or it's got to say that. Or you got to be aware of the gender thing and all those bits and pieces. I'm old school, you know what I mean? I'm waiting for someone to pat my head to knock them the fuck out. Do you get me? But all of those things is what we come up through. And my great-grandmother used to say, what don't kill will fatten. But the fact was, my generation in particular, most of the kids at that time, you were going to sink, 20 pints of beer or sniffing glue. Yeah, we're talking the 70s. And my plight was really about the sound systems and music against the academics, because that was the other way out. Spending a little bit of time in the institutions, I realized that academic world in its prehistoric state was a real farce. It was bullshit. And I come from a long line of academics. And in terms of growing up, I wasn't necessarily partaking in any of the riots or anything because I'm finding my feet as a kid growing up. But I was there, handing out a bottle of water, maybe breaking up a few rocks for the lads to chuck at the old bill and that lot. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But I was always about finding or navigating my way around it, possibly because, maybe the whole idea of the academics. So I was sent to Saturday school where we learned about our culture. My sister-in-law was the first black headmistress in a comprehensive school. And one of the dearest people growing up was a gentleman called Bernie Grant. He was a Marxist. And he was, I miss him. He was my mentor. He was my mate. He was everything. Do you know what I mean? And he was one of the first black politicians that entered the Houses of Parliament. And he made an indelible mark on my life. And through Bernie, keeping certain things in place in the colonies, and one such thing which I can talk about now, which I wouldn't have spoken about before, was the whole idea of, where you're from. And it was just an interesting path that we ended up taking through politics. But at the end of the day, it was about, where your parents are from, and it's the colonies, and they never gave up their land in the colonies, and So you take your domicile, as it were, from your father. And I guess in those days, there were a lot of fatherless children. So this was in the manuscript of the Inland Revenue and the taxes. So, it was an interesting ride, all that. And it's quite possible the reason why I'm still here today, that because we only ever paid income tax through the system. You got to understand that's what the system was. So everything that they'd set up to be against you, I guess I was one of the raisins that made it through. You understand? Where you tick all the boxes. You can't do this, you can't do that. So where were you going to find anybody that will be able to take advantage of the treaty? Blacks and Irish, because they never gave up their land. And then it was all part of the colonies. Interesting concept, but that's another book.
Jazzie, all these turn of events and all these things that happened back then, the birth of your vision of what you wanted to do musically and creatively came from that time. If we look back at your accomplishments and the things that have happened throughout your career now, would you say that has your vision actually come to fruition the way you planned it? And I mean, I'm sure there'd been a lot of things that changed and along the way, but
that's a good one. All I wanted to be coming up was the biggest sound system in the world. It was as simple as that. And in terms of the journey navigating through it, my humble beginnings outside of the family in a professional capacity, I worked for Tommy Steele for 2 years as a T-boy, and I was under a gentleman called Richard Dodd. So we done lots of recordings. I'm a sound engineer by trade, so I was the back end of the whole industry for a long time. And that really helped because I was able to really see how the industry worked. And that was in the real days of rock and roll, the 70s, proper things, you know what I mean? I was charging like £50 for a cup, literally for a pot of tea that they'd never drink. And every time they wanted another one, you just make a whole pot. So it was just little things like that where you were working with the studios, which were often the record labels will, rinse out the artists copious amounts of money for you to go and record in these places. And they've been there for decades. And that's how the whole industry ran. And I was on the tail end of all that. So I'd cut my teeth in the business. A few name drops. Hans Zimmer is where I cut my first release over at Lily Yard. Louis Jardim, Ronnie Bond. There were so many different bands and stuff. And what was interesting, my first job as a T-boy was cleaning, tidying up after the wind instruments left the studio session. So if you know what that is, pretty mucky job. So cleaning up all the phlegm and the spit for years, see my hands. It was, in those days you started at the bottom. And you learnt your trade. It was a trade thing. But it wasn't a sort of job that you could go to the job centre and get, do you know what I mean? So I was very lucky. I think I probably went on, I remember processing 100 letters, which was average. So everyone from RCA, Decca, Delane Lee, Red Bus Studios, Psalm East, Psalm West. I remember the names because it was traumatic for me. And every time you went into a studio for a job, and I'm really not making this up, but I'm trying to think about how to say it. But technically, Pat gave me the job because she said, "Can you take a joke?" And you think to yourself, yeah, fucking all right, innit? Yeah, but the jokes are pretty moody. And again, what don't kill puts a belly on you. So those were interesting times, being sent out for bars of chocolate innocently. And then you bring the chocolate back and they all say things like, "No, I want it your color," and stuff like that. And these were by big professional people. But you have to understand that was the time we were living in. Mm. You know, the geezers beating up their wives after they come out of the saloon and all that lot. It's everywhere. So, you know, I'm not looking for any like round of applause or anything. That's how it was. And in a funny way, I didn't mean any harm, but when you use the government name, the only time that name is used is when you get nicked or you're traveling. So that's something as a Funky Dread that my subculture or the alter ego was about, and us creating the Funky Dreads. It was because of all the shit that was there that you'd have to put up with, which we didn't have a choice of. You know, those things were done. You know what I mean? I come from an area where there was a rag and bone man. Yeah? I come from an area where you burnt coal. My brothers were paraffin boys. Do you know what I mean? The other side of it, you were getting beaten up by teddy boys. You're getting spat at by mods and rockers. And you're getting the fucking hell kicked out of you by the old Bill. You couldn't go home and tell your parents that. So that's the kind of way we grew up. And I think it's the same where I visited many countries and just sitting in. I was having a smoke with a couple of guys on the lawn or a little park in Brisbane. And, you know, it was kind of nice just being, excuse the pun, back to reality. But hearing some of the indigenous people who are locked in on the old drinks and their life, and this is their land, you know what I mean? Which is why I always give homage, you know, to the ancestors of this land. Because I've gone through it, you know what I mean? And I'm blessed through the ancestors of this land because the story transcends throughout our world and our diaspora. And it's interesting when the cultures meet, because this is what's important, is when our culture and what's happened over time, we've evolved. So me coming here is about our musical culture. So you are my family. And in terms of our family, and we share in all things, but the common denominator is the music and that sensibility of the music that allows us to communicate, exchange, you know, get to know each other because we're all like-minded. And one of the most important things, maybe by a happy accident, happened. I knew from being around a lot of sound systems and maybe a lot of people who were rich, not wealthy, rich, that there's a lot more to it, yeah? And within the realms of the music, that made us inseparably linked. And my happy accident was turning my sound system into an inclusive sound system, meaning that I faced the audience and the audience were part of it. And I think that outside of the fact we created the stuff in London and in England, and it's probably unique to that part of the world geographically, the rest hinges on inclusiveness. And I've been doing this from, like I said, 1977. So it's nice to come, you know, to Australia and see the evolution of our community and how it's developed. And I love the fact, in a strange way, that the music's gone so full circle and it's gone back to an apartheid. Yeah? Because you got house music, you got rap music, you got rock music. What the fuck is all that about? Right? When we sit down and reason, it's music, isn't it?
It's music.
And when I came up, I always was taught by Miss Percival, my keyboard piano teacher, that she would always say, and it's weird, I'm going to make this point again, but when you kept saying Trevor, that's not the name I use. The name I actually use as part of my government name is Beresford. And it's quintessentially quite English, you know? And this one will put you off. My slave name is Romeo. So that's the surname that was given by the masters that took on the estate, which I ended up finding with Portuguese. And I guess through my situation, I've been able to process it all and be the geezer I am today. Do you know what I mean? And you know what's important? Because when you are different from anybody else, it's more a case of it's fear of the unknown. And what was important to me, I guess, you know, studying and stuff like that and utilizing that little part of my brain, it was for me to understand what we say, I, to be able to deal with all the isms that exist. And part of how I dealt with that was becoming a funky dread, which I was sent down from the planet Ard to fight against rap attackers, backers, and to allow us to enjoy the pleasure of music with melody. And the music with melody allowed us to move ourselves. And in that movement, it moved everything. The blood around your body, the sweat, the closeness of somebody else, their sweat, etc., etc. And all of those things combined need to be in a controlled environment. And that's what we as the Funky Dreads are down here on Earth doing.
Is this how, like, you're between sort of staying grounded, because all these things that you're describing are and identifying are, I guess, ways that you remind yourself about like your mission and how have you navigated through, I guess when things started to roll for you and things started to be successful, how did you navigate between achieving and allowing things to sort of just come your way and staying grounded?
I reckon growing up, you know, I'm a mummy's boy, yeah? I was suckled by my mum. And we've got 6 brothers who used to beat the shit out of us, you know what I mean? Just as brothers and sisters, want to toughen you up, don't they? Part and parcel of that helped in the groundedness. I think the educational side allowed me to be calm, where I understood certain things because I put that energy into it. So not that I spend copious times at uni or any nonsense like that, but you surround yourself with good people. Education is the key. And once you have a form of education, it's just how you implement it. And in terms of me being grounded, I know is just a vessel. So the power of what I'm the custodian for is what keeps me grounded. And the fact of, I fear God alone. I don't fear man. So those are things that have been installed through maybe the time I spent being forced into church and school and stuff like that. My old man always used to say, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. he was fucking exhausted with me. Because like everyone was my mate, do you know what I mean? The best one it had to be the skinheads of Vincent Park. Because we loved each other. And the coolest thing about the skinheads is that they wanted to emulate the Rude Boys, and then the attitude of, you know, the burliness of a skinhead, it'll be something that frightens your average guy. But if you go and talk to a biker, if you go and talk to any of those early clans kind of people, you realise there's something different. And in my manor, growing up in North London, we had black skinheads. It's a funny thing to think about. Didn't have any black mods. Think about that, right? The skinheads were the ones who used to protect us.
What do you think that is?
Because we were like-minded.
Yeah.
They loved the music.
Yeah.
They loved the fashion.
Yeah.
And all the other things, because they're not all fascists and stuff like that. I guess there are various splinters of it.
Yeah.
And we look at people and we judge people by how they look. So for me, you know, the way we were with the skinheads, it was fucking blinding, because everybody, you don't go next to them, you don't, they're our fucking mates. First, look, this thing called beans on toast, I had that with skinhead. Do you know what I mean? Like, what's that about? You know what I mean? Then him having, like, you know, ackee and sawfish would have been from my household. And that's how the whole thing happened. But every time there was a mod or a teddy boy or something, you know, usually you had to run unless you were fighting them. And they never fought in ones. I remember doing loads of things as a youngster, particularly in Archway, Holloway Road and all that lot. Being chased, me and my sister being chased by the skinheads and stuff like that. I'm sorry, by the teddy boys and the skinheads coming to our rescue. And in those days, we talk about a class system. And somehow there was this code of, you know, you didn't say this or you didn't do that. There was a street code, like, as it were, wrapped up in the class system. So there are variants of all those things that maybe help me to process some of the stuff that was going on. Then you have to respect it's a multicultural society, and the people who are sometimes in control are the ones who always feel the most afraid, and they're the ones who are throwing down the worst atrocities because they're afraid. You know what I mean?
It almost sounds like punk rock and hip hop, like what was happening in the US. This is kind of like what was happening.
Well, you know what a lot of it is, guys, is us working it out now. In the eye of the storm, everyone's a cunt. Do you know what I mean? But when you've had time to process it, take a look back, have some experiences, and then you realise, interesting. So you eat meat and you're a vegetarian. Let's meet halfway in the middle, something plant-based. Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, it's a bit like that. So you take little bits and so on and so forth, which is genuinely quite an interesting thing about growing up in Britain, because it was, whether you want to believe it or not, a multicultural society. That's unique to London. Don't get it twisted. It's like when I come to Australia, you think, all right, Sydney, Melbourne, that. It ain't till you go out to where it really happens. That's Australia. All this is the evolution, or you know, like Frankenstein in the fucking lab and all the mistakes. That's us, not here, innit? Do you know what I mean? And we found a way of functioning and living together. And the tonic for that is the music. Whether it's punk, whether it's Benny and the Jets, whether it's Bowie, whether it's, you know, Augustus Pablo, whether it's 10 City, whether it's a Land Down Under. Do you know what I mean? It's all music. And for me, I'm old school, you know what I mean? So for me, it's about melody and lyrics. But, you know, I got like, you know, my kids and my, you know, goddaughters and stuff like that. Shy One's coming here soon. That's my goddaughter. And she does this incredible embellishment of all, like a fusion thing. Fucking hardly hear any lyrics, but what's interesting is just hearing the music, and I'm not afraid. Whereas my old man, you know, was listening to Lou Rawls and a lot of country and western and stuff like that. And when I drive to baseline, he'd be like, "Oh, fucking turn that down. And it's all this buff, buff, buff and all that." Look, do you know what I mean? Whereas we got to be the coolest generation that's ever surfaced the planet Earth. You know, we're doing gigs now and sharing a spliff or two with the young'uns, you know what I mean, whilst they're getting into it. And we can smell their vapors and they're aware of our home, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. It's fucking beautiful, you know what I mean? I'll tell you what, I did WOMAD the other day, and one of the main reasons why I wanted to do WOMAD again, I'd done it about 14 years ago, yeah? And what was interesting, I was like, fucking, what's all that about? It was all this different music and that. And whilst I was in the dressing room, the penny dropped. It was like, they call it world music, and why do we have to call it? That's why I talk about apartheid. You know what I mean? So my next mission is to smash all of that, and it should just be music. Why has it got to be electronic dance music? Why has it got to be techno? And why have you got to be da? What happened to the days when it was all eclectic? You know what I mean? John Peel picking up something, you go, "Oh, that's interesting." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So. For us in this room, in our community, that may still exist. We're not pushing it on anybody, but again, that's how the trees grow. You know what I mean? You know, all the vitamins and the light and all of that. Look, is all by the different music, the different smells, the different energies. And you get out and you listen to it on some speakers, like, "Oh fuck yeah, I like that." Do you know what I mean? I'll have a bit of that.
Yeah.
And what's interesting now is that, for us lot probably in the room, we could probably absorb music a lot better than the other bit. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to end up sounding like my old man. So I'm going to tap it on the head.
Can I take you back to the early sound system days? Because your brothers all had sound systems as well. But in those, and we were just talking about that compartmentalization of music. In those early days, those sound systems were basically reggae music and playing lovers rock. But so it was quite radical for you guys to just go out and start playing soul and rare groove, right? On those sound systems, or not?
Nah, not at all. London, yeah?
Yeah.
Everything happened there. Everything happened there. So what's interesting is that I remember we used to go roller skating with 2 sessions at Alexander Palace on a Sunday. And the DJs used to play there. There was this geezer called Emperor Roscoe, DJ from Canada. And Froggy and Martin had a custom orange sound system, which they would have called the disco back in those days. And their view of DJing was, you know, with the lights, it was in the pub, you know what I mean? They're a bit in excessy, you know what I mean? Back room of the pub, all that kicking off. So at this one session, our local sound system, which was Fat Man Hi-Fi from Tottenham, usually played at these afternoon gigs. But for some reason, these guys are putting this massive sound, well, you know, disco rig, and so on and so forth. And it seemed like Roscoe was playing against Fat Man. How'd that work? Like, we're thinking reggae, with this Canadian Jack Daniels voice DJ, you know what I mean? Who I actually adored, because I used to build these little amps from Edgware Road, and it started off these radio things. build the set, and solder it and put all these bits together. That's how I built my first preamp. That's how I took all the electricity shocks and so on and so forth, knowing not to touch the line, you know what I mean? Earth it to the chassis, all that nonsense. Anyway, we're up there. And for whatever reason, Fat Man's sound does not fire. There's a technical problem. Fucking Roscoe wins the day. Changed my life.
Yeah, right.
It changed my absolute life. Because there I was looking at all these white geezers fucking annihilating the sounds. It's like, ooh, the Bourneville moment here. But what I ended up doing, I always considered the experiences as they're half full rather than they're fucked up. So I looked at the whole thing and analysing it, and that's one of the main tweaks I made, was that I moved from being part-time to full-time, being super diligent, understanding the difference between all those speakers probably cancelling each other's out, learning about Ohm's law, moving from like the later vowels and that whole DC power to MOSFETs, then into A-class and all these different amplifications. The application of moving Carney around, because I couldn't drive. That's the story of the 14 bus.
Yeah.
So I learned quickly, probably because I'm on the back end of the scene, so it's not a secret, yeah? This word efficiency. And a lot of the DIY sounds, we didn't have XLRs, soldering was out the window. Remember, used to use matchsticks. Yeah, Swan were always the best. Yeah, Swan matches. Yeah. Any technicians in the house? When you smash the plug, you got to stick the cable in because you ain't got a fucking ceramic plug. You stick the wires in and hammer in a couple of matchsticks that'll keep it in place. This is before we got good on gaffer tape. So it was little things like that. And then I learned the difference between, I remember doing an installation when I was at Theatre Projects. You'd know the place as Camden Palace. I worked for Tannoy for a few years. And one of the tricks, he had this dual concentric unit. Weren't really any good. I'm sorry, Sean. I know someone's recording this, so fuck it. But it weren't really good, right? But what was interesting is that they created a cabinet that had 6 dual concentric units, yeah? And they'd power each unit individually. So each one of these things had an amp, blah, blah. Anyway, the argument about it being efficient and detailed, the sonics being detailed, so all the crossover points were in place. We were still playing from an analog turntable, so the sound was pretty amazing. That was my first claim to fame. And then I learned that if I used dual concentrics on a tripod, I could stick maybe 16 of them in a little van, yeah? With a couple of tripods and stuff like that. Those times, the amps, we used to have these little, you know them as crown amps now, but these little amps, right, made in England, were only like 50, 60 watts, but it was the full RMS at 8 ohms. And fucking hell, I started to put these things in and it was really working and stuff like that. And then I learned for the weight against what you had to move and so on and so forth. And that's how I developed my sound system to be so efficient. I had looms made. It was still the DIY idea. So we're looking at all different speakers from Altex to Clipforms to JBLs. And then I'm going to sound like a snob, but the British always had the best engineering, especially in those days, you know what I mean? We were using some really interesting things. And that's how my sound system became one of those sounds that played all night and had a little bit of clarity and was reliable. Where in the DIY sense, you know what that could be like, do you know what I mean? It's too many chefs, you know, one of them. So in one of the songs, I always say, for one to make a decision and the rest to follow, it wasn't preaching. It was more about the knowledge of what you knew of what to do. And I kicked down a lot of sound systems like that, especially going, you know, in our day, you lot call it hip hop, but it was electro. We were B-boys. So when we traveled to other places, we were bringing what you call an electronic sound. But my thing sounded so good because the stuff was tuned to that music. You understand? Rather than it being an array of everything. And those are the kind of little things, little nuances that I guess I picked up from an apprentice, working in the back room and seeing the guys always trying to get perfection and stuff like that. And there were loads of mistakes and experiments. And I'm a hoarder. So I'd collect all the old gear that they'd never used and take them apart, just like when I was a kid. And that's how I built my sound. I built a sound system that you plant in the middle of the room, had 16, 18-inch subwoofers, scoops, JBLs. I had 16, 10-inch JBLs, about 12, 24, 25 tweeters. And because I'd been to America and, you know, my family involved in music and that, where sound systems used to have their horns like all in one, well, we'd come along and you would make like an area, so a surround sound. And then I'd have all the JBL 2425 just hanging off a bit of a chain, and they were floating. And I found out years later that Duke Reed and those early sound systems, they used to put the tweeters in the trees. And you think about all these things and you laugh like today, but that was the height of technology. How are you going to produce this sound that everybody would hear, right? You know, in the old days, the sound was down there and every engineer will tell you, fucking geezers, get out of the way, you're blocking the top. You know what I mean? Move. Do you know what I mean? Like that. So we used to fly as, you know, and stuff like that. And it's weird because if you go back and you look at anything from the 70s, particularly the disco era, they copied. No. It was coincidence. But all of those things were looking for the perfect sound. And that's why, in my mind, in my laboratory or in London with what we were doing, the sound was so efficient. You know, I used to use a lot of like really good equipment, but I had tons of it. So it was multiples of all this great equipment. And that's what used to fool the bigger sounds, because I was just a kid, you know, well, say a kid compared to those big sound systems. That would have been just a little bit after the 14 bus with the trolley and stuff like that. But you could probably see how much I was into it from the young part. So I kind of got a reputation as a bit of a nerd and stuff like that. But, you know, my family was pretty notorious. So no one would fuck about, do you know what I mean? So I was given that little bit of path. And I think those are the things that help keep my feet on the ground. Because I'm a nerd, I love that. Even when my crew will be packing up at the, you know, at the end of a show and I come out of the dressing room, I still like it. I'll go around. I might pick up a couple of cables. I don't lift much anymore. But I will be mouthing it off. Do you know what I mean? And I've got scars to that beer from when I was in the sound and you're in the back of the van and the speakers will fall on you when you go around corners and stuff like that. Fuck, me and Dad got so... I remember one year we had enough of the speakers pinching us and we said, when we get our own, so we're never traveling in the back of... We're never going to be what they call a box boy, yeah? All those little things, those are the things that...
that make you,
you know, if it don't make you, it breaks you.
Leaning into, like, learning and mastering skills and becoming, like, stronger and resilient, how's that been for you throughout your life? I mean, has it been an easier path as you got older? Like, that habit, you know, like... dealing with that ebbs and flows.
You know what's weird? I don't know anything else.
Yeah.
I don't know what, when it's all sweet and nice, and that creeps me out. Do you know what I mean? Like, how's that all nice? No, I don't know. This is what I know. And I love it. I fucking love it. You lot called up, or I was having something to eat. I was about to have a shit and a shave, and they go, "Nah, you got to come down and do this thing." You know what I mean? It's like, that's what I'm into. Yeah, let's do this. Rock and roll. Do you know what I mean? Sweating and everything. But that's like the game, and for me, it's a little bit like I enjoy that side of it. Dean was losing his nut. And we were like, fucking hell, yeah. Oh my God, get the driver. The driver was having a mare as well, and I'm sitting there just fucking winding them all up. It's brilliant, but a reason why it's brilliant, because I don't sound weird, but it makes me feel young. You know what I mean? I'm in it.
Yeah.
You can't blag a blagger, do you know what I mean? I'm in it. I know about that, do you know what I mean? And what's the other great thing is, when I'm around the young'uns, is to learn from them and constantly being inspired.
Yeah.
And that ain't now an age thing or whether you're male or female. It ain't about that. It's like, if you got information and it's sounding good, I'm in there. I'm that far up it.
Can I remind you of
She's there, though, isn't she? Yeah. Brilliant.
Can I remind you of another little story in the book which I absolutely loved because it was just so evocative? When you first went back to Antigua, where your family's from, and you have this beautiful memory of going fishing on the beach and cooking the fish with no foil, just on an open fire, but then you take the fish back into the water and you eat it in the ocean. And I can't quite remember what that did to the fish, but just how.
All right, so as poor people, right, the food you eat is over seasoned because it's old. Yes, I don't know if many of you know. Fucking hell, ooh, privileged lot here, isn't we? Anyway, technically, like loads of spices and stuff like that, and I'll be fortunate enough to just have good product. That, maybe has a little dash of salt and maybe a little olive oil and blah, blah. But back home, the fishermen, when they get their catch or whatever, they ain't got all that foil and all that nonsense. So this particular fish, how you can cook it like that, the fish is called doctor fish. I don't know what they call it here. The fish is very hard skinned, but underneath, it's like cod. So what the fishermen then do, in my country, we have 365 beaches. So every corner you turn is a beach.
Yeah.
So we'd go out to a remote, peninsula or whatever, and we have these barbecues, and everything is from the land, and you put back in the land. So my first experience of that is going on a fishing boat to a really remote cove, and then they're choosing specifically the fish what they're going to eat. And I'm just assuming this now, and I'm sort of seeing snapper, trout, this, that, bream, and all these kind of fish. And then there's this black fish, or it's like brown, and it's got like patches on it, and it's really fucking ugly, right? And that's the fish that they keep picking. And I'm thinking, I'm fucking from England. Where's the ketchup? You know what I mean? Then they're picking this stuff. So anyway, they build the fire and everything. And I'm thinking, they're going to put a grill on it or something, or at least a bit of foil in it. So they do whatever, take out the guts and the eyes. Right, they kept the eyes in or whatever. All scaled, yeah? You chuck it on the charcoal like that. You think, fucking hell, that's going to die, innit? Literally, it's not sushi. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, you get this fish on the beach in your Speedos, and you're cleaning, like when you burn toast, yeah? And you're scraping off all the burnt bit. You literally get this fish, yeah? It's all fucked up. You go in the sea, and the salt from the seawater is what infuses the fish, yeah? And somehow, as messy as it is, like eating with your hands, in the sea, with little fishes around you eating all the rest. Listen, the sweetest, most, what was that restaurant we went to? Ain't got nothing on this fish, I'm telling you. This fish alone, burnt to a crisp. But somehow the sea water and everything, it balances it out. And from that side, that's love fish, you know? And yeah, I've been eating fish ever since.
So many of those little stories in your book make your childhood sound really idyllic. And yet, when I compare you to people of your generation living in England, you know, music people, they always talk about London as being grey, you know, dire, depressing. And even though you mentioned the shit that was going on, your stories make it sound like this was a fantastic time. You know, the world was my oyster. And it makes me think how much of an optimist you are, or how much of a always seeing the opportunity in something rather than the downside of something.
Fair enough.
Has that stayed with you for your whole life? Like, is it that kind of always seeing maybe not the good side, but the opportunity in something?
I'll be honest with you, you know, Bernie helped me understand something. It's half full, it's not half empty.
Yeah.
The seniors that have been around is always, you know, every mickle, meck and muckle. There's good in everyone. And there's situations where it could be just bare misunderstanding. But at the end of the day, it's like, you know, it's what's in your mind's eye. And it's whatever you believe. But like I said before, it's God alone I fear. So from that point of view, everything's an adventure. Especially waiting for 7 minutes for a lift in the hotel. I'm working. You know what was good about that? I met loads of people who were also waiting for the lift. And the biggest laugh I've had tonight is 2 Aussie geezers actually going to themselves. Like, I can hear them because it's a confined space. Fucking sounds English, mate. They're trying to work out who I am, do you know what I mean? Fucking brilliant, love it. So it still happens, you know what I mean? And then, you know, on us departing or whatever, they're going to fucking remember me like I'll remember them. And I'll embellish on that conversation on the next round, yeah? So, you know, people are people, and I guess in a funny way, I'm a people's person. The idea of what we've all come to, I'm with one of those sort of proud fathers who believe in our community, and in terms of sense of always feeling, we would say, I feel protected, not just by the red, black and the gold, but by our community and all the members of our community. So I could never get lost. And inside of that, that's why I say as well, I don't think the idea of me fearing, it's more the case of the unknown. But many guys that I've come to know in the music business from a spiritual point of view have always said that, you know, I'm the kind of person who would walk alone, but not in a bad way, in a good way, because like, I want to come here, I want to meet you guys, I want to see you guys. And then when I leave here, I might go another place and then meet other people. And then by the time the journey's finished, wow, we're really super powerful and it is intact and it is real. And that's what I say is I'm just the soldier for it still, you see me? And inside of that is something that we all created ourselves. So, in a strange way, it's still fun. Do you know what I mean? And in the fun, it's like an adventure playground. Or even within Celestine's prophecy, you're walking through the garden, you're seeing all these beautiful things. See, ya? All beautiful people. You come out, fucking hear Jazzy mouth it off for 20 minutes. It's blinding, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Love it.
Do we ask the crowd if they would like to ask any questions? Does anyone out there wants to? We got
make it
probably
difficult. I'm not taking any
We've
shit
got enough
questions.
time for maybe
Make it
3
hard.
questions. Yes.
Does it get to be when are you listening to music or is that
Every day I do that, fella. I guess the difference is what name it goes under. But yeah, every week, every day, someone's doing something. That's not enough of an answer. The next part is I'm now currently composing and working in Dolby Atmos. And I'm really interested in the future. I'm working with quite a lot of different developers who are developing the product. And I'm at it every day, mate. You need to listen to my radio show on My Soul on a Sunday. I do 3 till 5. Then I go up the road and I do solar radio from 6 till 8. And this happens all on one day.
Wow.
And yeah, it's eclectic, it's new, it's old, and there's a lot of stuff that I won't even talk about because I'm testing it. So until you lot come back and say, what was that song there? Or Dean may do a mix, or Booker may do a mix, or Ramsey and Fenn, or The Chronicles, or whatever. Every day I love it. Do you know what I mean? The difference is music has changed, I guess. And this whole idea of these productions that we knew or as a one-stop have now been a binary thing where we're streaming ideas, we're exchanging in a slightly different way, where you're looking for this name to pop out all the time, because we come from a time where the producer or the sonics, you fucking knew what the sound was. Maybe you're bombarded with it. Do you subscribe to streaming?
I do, yeah.
Enough said. Next question.
Please, Jazzy, I really loved one of your songs in the 90s.
Only one.
It was a good one. There was one that I just really, there was a line that said Actors Centre, Centre of the World.
Uh-huh.
Did you study acting?
She's messed that one up, isn't it? It's the accent.
Do you remember the song?
It's
You know the one I'm talking
Africa.
about?
Africa is the center of the world.
Yeah, we know that.
Did I get it wrong like that? I thought you were talking about the Actors Centre.
Africa.
I'm so sorry.
Oh my
African center.
Obviously.
Now give her a round of applause. No.
30 years.
No, you know what's important? You know what's important about that? It's got nothing to do with insulting, nothing like that.
No,
you know the
no.
beauty of that is you ask the question.
Yeah.
That's what's important. All right. So no, look, on a serious note, you ask the question. Have you seen the Peter Kay sketch where he gets out all the things where he thinks it says this and you think it's that?
Yeah.
Blinding, innit? Similar scenario. You lot got to watch that. It's better than Spinal Tap. I love it. Look, but what the lady said and what she asked, and if you remember what I said before, Miss Percival, explained a great melody is never forgotten.
Miss Percival.
Where she was my blind piano teacher, right? And that's how I ended up working for the RNIB, the Royal National Institute of the Blind. I used to make talking books, audio, which you now know as audio books. Mm-hmm. They used to be for the blind people. It was called talking books. Yeah. And that was an educational thing. So I used to be recording all those, sitting down fucking hours listening to rubbish. But what was good, we used some great equipment, do you know what I mean? But what was lovely about what you said was that
Nothing.
you know when they say that all singing the same hymn and that lot, slightly different melody, but you were in there. That's in.
Off key,
No. You're an actor, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
You see?
I related in that way.
And that's the beauty of it, you know?
That's what I took out of it, and it was wrong all along.
No, it's yours. It's whatever you want. I wish I would have said what she said. But no, to really get it is the fact that you remembered the line,
I do.
right? And you remembered the line to mean whatever you heard.
Needed.
So I'm going to use this term, lost in translation,
Oh, exactly.
right?
Woo!
And I'll tell you what, how many songs have you got that you listen to on your cassette that you've gone and said a lyric?
Yep.
Yeah? How many times have we been on stage
In the shower.
right? But here's another good thing. I'm on stage, giving it all this, and you're in the mood of it, and then you totally forget the lyrics. But you're riding the melody, and that's what happened there. Do you know what I mean? She was locked in the melody. It could have been anything. Actor, actress, Africa. It could have been anything.
They're all the age.
It's all on the same spectrum, innit? You know what I mean? I like that.
Thank you very much.
Those are the kind of questions I want.
Go on over there.
So good.
It's also what you represented for us as black kids growing up. You fucking were trouble, right? You made us feel strong and proud.
Word.
Looking at the music now back home, right? Who do you think is carrying that play? Who's carrying that torch?
I'll be honest with you, I hope nobody isn't carrying it, because I want them to carry their own. I want them to, to illuminate the sky with their own sound. And maybe they utilize that as inspiration. Ever forward, never backwards. And the only time you go backwards is to understand the principles. But in terms of who's doing it, they're for me right now, there's so many. I'm loving it. And because of the technology, it's made the world so much smaller. But if there was anyone I was going to pick, I ain't had a smoke yet. So I think probably Children of Zeus. They Children of Zeus. Again, I've got to big up this producer. Her name's Shy One. Right? I put my money on them too.
Yeah, sure.
So I want in Melbourne at the moment.
Let me give her a shout. I'll find out for you. You know what's good though? You can just Google that, can't you? You ain't got to ask much questions. If you want the definitive thing, or otherwise I could say, oh yeah, she called me yesterday because she wanted somebody to get into a gig and blah, blah. No, that's not the only reason why she called me. But I believe she's on her way. She's on her way coming to Australia.
Jazzie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I've just got one other bit, one other bit. Are you lot hiding the books or something?
No,
Oh, no, they're down the back.
we're going
Oi, get a book in.
get the book in.
Yeah, you know I preempted that though, don't you?
So if
It's
you did,
sealed and it's got your name in it. I've done it already.
if you did order a book
It's
and you
got your
paid for
name on it.
it's on the
It's
back
all
with your name
signed.
on it.
It's shrink wrapped.
Done.
Job done.
It's beautiful, the book.
Thank you guys.
So beautiful.
Took me 10 years to put that book together.
Now, Jazzie, you're going to be doing a bit of a set for us here.
I'll spin a couple of tunes. I've got no vinyl though. Everywhere you go these days, they go, oh, play some vinyl, play some. Shut up. You're moving the times, isn't we? Slugging around records anymore.
Yeah. But
Thank God for technology. Yeah?
Please give it up for Jazzie B. Come on, give it up.